Hi, my name is Dr. Samuel Pegram. I'm a rheumatologist and I would like to welcome you to the living room, RHEUM, as in rheumatology, a place where we discuss rheumatologic issues from the patient's perspective. Recently, we've had a lot of significant weather changes, unusual weather changes here in the Lone Star State, and so I thought it would be appropriate and somewhat fun to look at rheumatologic issues that change with the weather. Now, I'm sure there's not a day that goes by that you haven't heard from someone, an uncle, a brother, your grandfather, your children sometimes, that say to you and say to me, Doctor, I can always tell when the weather's about to change because there's increase in my knee pain. Or my back pain seems to worsen when there's some change in the humidity. Or that I notice that my hands begin to stiffen and I develop swelling in the small joints of my hands and increased pain in my tendons when there's changes in the temperature. We hear it all the time. We heard it when we were young. We hear it now as adults. Heck, even Hippocrates wrote in 400 BC that he noted that there were changes in health patterns with changes in variability in the weather. And yet over all these years, no one has been able to definitively tell us whether or not this is true. But we hear it so often, it would certainly seem that it is plausible that patients' joint discomfort does change with variations in the weather. When patients make these comments in my office, I'm obligated as a physician to respond based on medical fact, medical data, because that's what I do. But can I really tell the patient truthfully that there's medical fact and data that supports what they obviously feel? In 2007, there was an article published in the American Journal of Medicine that looked at 200 patients who had osteoarthritis of the knees. The average age of these patients was 60. 64% of the patients were women, and about 10.5% of the patient population studied was African American or Latino. They looked at whether or not there were changes, worsening of joint discomfort due to osteoarthritis in the knee based on a number of changes in weather patterns. They looked at humidity. They looked at barometric pressure. They looked at changes in the ambient temperature, dew points, wind speeds, etc. And what they found in that 3-month trial is that they found there was a consistent worsening of joint discomfort in patients with osteoarthritis of the knee with a change in barometric pressure and also a change in the ambient temperature. Sounds familiar. In 2015, there was a study published by the National Institute of Health. They looked at 810 patients between the ages of 65 and 85. These patients had either osteoarthritis of the hip and or osteoarthritis of the knees. And they looked at these patients over 18 months. They used pain journals that they assessed every 2 weeks. And they looked at that data, again, in conjunction with changes in various weather patterns. Again, number of weather patterns, humidity, dew points, etc. And they assessed this data again at day 0, month 6, month 12, and month 18. And what they found was, again, there was a significant change in joint discomfort with changes of various weather patterns. There seemed to be increased joint discomfort based on average daily humidity, 1 day. They also found that there was changes in joint discomfort with a 3-day average in humidity, consistent and significant. They also found there was a change in joint discomfort when you looked at the combination of average 1 day in humidity and changes in ambient temperature. Again, sounds like what most of us hear our patients and our relatives say. In 2020, there's an interesting study where they looked at a number of medical articles on this topic of changes in joint discomfort with changes in the temperature. In fact, they looked at over 4,700 medical articles, and they found 43 out of that 4,700 that they thought had robust scientific method, that these were valid studies with good scientific data that they could rely on as being true. And they found that 67% of the conclusions of those studies showed that there was, in fact, a direct correlation between changes in joint discomfort and changes in weather patterns, variability in weather patterns. Sounds, again, familiar. Although some of the patients had changes that were not consistent with what you and I might think, meaning sometimes their joint pain improved with changes in these weather patterns. There was another study published in the British Journal of Medicine, 2017. Interesting study that was based on Medicare data. Patients between the ages of 65, 85, and these patients, they looked at data from office visits, 11 million of them, 11 million visits to their internist of patients who had various rheumatologic conditions, rheumatoid arthritis, osteoarthritis, degenerative disc disease, spondylosis, patients who had joint discomfort not based on any evidence of trauma. And of those 11 million office visits to their internist, they found that 2 million of those visits were on rainy days, and 9 million of those visits were on sunny and dry days. Guess this study wasn't done in Seattle. And what they found when they looked at, was there a change in degree of discomfort on rainy days, as we often would anticipate, and was this different from the degree of discomfort in these various rheumatologic conditions on sunny days? And they found that there was absolutely no consistent changes in the degree of discomfort and worsening of these disease processes on rainy days versus dry days. Doesn't sound like what my uncle said. So, looking at all of this data, we can, with certainty, say that there is no certainty in this issue as of today. We do know, though, that it's been consistently mentioned by patients over millennia. And certainly in my lifetime as a rheumatologist, over 33 years, we hear it all the time. So there's got to be something to it. But we just haven't found out exactly yet what that something is. That means we must have another discussion at some point in time regarding this same issue here in the living room. I look to see you real soon.